If you're over 60, there's one quiet financial habit that could wipe out decades of savings overnight. No warning. No obvious red flags. You go to bed thinking your nest egg is safe, and by morning a single shift in the market, a sudden fee, or a hidden clause leaves your balance gutted. As a retirement planner, I've seen far too many seniors who did everything right, worked hard, saved diligently, avoided extravagance, only to see their future undermined by one overlooked asset. Not from overspending, not from medical bills, and not from bad luck, but from something they thought was safe. Yes, I'm talking about an asset most retirees believe protects them. Certain types of annuities and high-fee insurance products. Millions of older adults buy them every year, believing they guarantee security. And while in some cases they can provide peace of mind, the wrong contract at the wrong stage of life can silently eat away at your savings. Hidden fees, surrender charges, and inflexible payouts can leave you trapped, watching your wealth drain away, unable to stop it. The most dangerous part? No one warns you until it's too late. Today, I'm going to walk you through 7 common financial traps that quietly rob retirees of stability, independence, and dignity. Have you ever wondered if your so-called safe investments might be backfiring? If so, you need to hear this. And I promise, it could save not just your money, but your future freedom. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss a senior wealth tip made just for you. 1. The illusion of guaranteed income. As a retirement planner, few things disturb me more than the stories of seniors who enter retirement thinking they've secured lifetime peace of mind, only to realize their guaranteed income came at a devastating cost. And annuities, yes, those contracts marketed as safe, secure, predictable, are often the culprit. You've probably heard it all your life. An annuity pays you steady income you can't outlive. It sounds ideal. For many, it's sold as the answer to unpredictable markets and the fear of running out of money. And in theory, it can be. But once you pass 60, everything changes. Especially the way your money needs to work for you. Here's what too few people are told. Annuities often lock you into long surrender periods. 10, sometimes 15 years, during which you can't touch your own money without paying crushing penalties. Add in administrative fees, rider charges, and commissions that are hidden in the fine print, and suddenly that safe income stream is quietly draining your balance. Let me explain clearly. A traditional investment account, like an IRA with index funds, may have fees of 0.1% or 0.2%. But some annuities charge 2% to 4% every single year. That means if you've put $300,000 into an annuity, you might be paying $9,000 annually just in fees. Year after year. And because those fees are subtracted quietly, most retirees don't realize what's happening until their balance is far smaller than expected. I'll never forget a client of mine, Mr. Harrison, 68, a retired electrician from Wisconsin. He had worked his whole life, built up a modest but comfortable savings, and wanted stability. A local agent convinced him to put $250,000 into a variable annuity, promising growth and protection. For 5 years, he felt secure, receiving small monthly checks. But when an emergency struck, a roof collapse that required immediate repairs, he discovered he couldn't access more than a small portion of his own funds without a 12% surrender penalty. His $250,000 was tied up, earning modest returns, while his out-of-pocket expenses mounted. The stress nearly broke him. Here's the part that no one tells you. Annuities shift control away from you. Once your money is locked, the company decides how much you can withdraw, when, and at what cost. And if you pass away earlier than expected, some contracts don't return the remaining balance to your family, it disappears back to the insurer. The guarantee comes at the price of flexibility, liquidity, and often legacy. So what should you do if you're over 60 and considering, or already own, an annuity? First, review the contract carefully with a fiduciary planner, not just the agent who sold it to you. Second, calculate the true annual cost, every fee, rider, and charge. Third, avoid locking all your savings into one product. Keep liquid assets accessible for emergencies. And if you already own an annuity, explore options to reduce penalties over time rather than surrendering all at once. Because here's the truth. What once felt like safety can become a trap. And if this shocked you, wait until you hear how a so-called safe investment that many retirees flock to, bonds, may actually be setting you up for invisible losses that erode your purchasing power year after year. What I'm about to share will likely change the way you think about fixed income forever. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please type 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. Now, let's move on to part 2. Bonds. Safe, steady, reliable. That's the story most seniors have heard their entire lives. When the stock market feels unpredictable, when volatility makes your heart race, bonds are supposed to be the calm harbor, the anchor that holds your retirement portfolio steady. But what if I told you that for older adults, especially those living on a fixed income, bonds can quietly destroy your savings power, leaving you poor year after year without you even noticing? This isn't about speculation or gambling. It's about a force that eats at wealth slowly, invisibly, and relentlessly: inflation. As a retirement planner, I've seen countless seniors walk into my office clutching bond statements with pride, believing they're safe. They point to the guaranteed coupon payments, the fixed maturity values, and the promise of stability. But what they don't see is how those same bonds are quietly locking them into losses. Not losses on paper, but losses in real life, where groceries, medical care, and housing costs rise far faster than their income. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you put $200,000 into a collection of bonds paying 3% per year. On paper, that looks reassuring. A steady $6,000 annually, no wild market swings. But if inflation is running at 5%, your money is losing 2% of its value each year. Over 10 years, that safe investment isn't protecting your future, it's eroding it. The dollars you thought were fixed are shrinking in power, and by the time you need them most, they no longer stretch far enough. I once worked with a client named Mrs. Leonard, a 74-year-old widow from Kentucky. After her husband passed, she wanted absolute security. Her bank advisor convinced her to shift nearly all of her savings into long-term municipal bonds, arguing they were tax-advantaged and risk-free. For the first few years, she felt at peace. Checks came in like clockwork, and she never worried about the stock market. But as the cost of living rose, something began to change. Gasoline doubled, her prescription drugs increased in price, and even her property taxes climbed. Meanwhile, her bond income never budged. What had once felt like stability became a trap. By the time she realized it, she was dipping into principal just to make ends meet. Her safe bonds weren't protecting her, they were chaining her to a sinking ship. And here's what made it worse. Interest rates eventually rose. When that happened, the bonds she held lost value on the open market. If she had to sell them early to cover expenses, she'd be forced to take a loss. The so-called safety of bonds only works if you can hold them all the way to maturity. But life doesn't follow tidy maturity schedules. Emergencies, medical bills, or family needs rarely wait until your bond matures. So what seniors end up with is the worst of both worlds: income that doesn't keep up with inflation and capital values that fall when rates climb. Here's what I want you to understand. Bonds are not inherently bad. They have their place, especially in balanced portfolios. But for retirees, putting too much faith in them can quietly destroy your lifestyle. Because safety without growth is not safety at all, it's just a slower path to running out of money. Every year you spend in retirement is a battle against inflation, and if your assets don't grow faster than the cost of living, you're losing even when it feels like you're standing still. So what can you do differently? First, diversify. Don't allow bonds to dominate your retirement plan. A mix of dividend-paying stocks, real assets, and carefully chosen bond funds can help balance safety with growth. Second, match bond durations to your real spending horizon. Don't lock yourself into 20-year bonds when you may need the money in 5. Third, look for inflation-protected options, such as Treasury inflation-protected securities, TIPS, which adjust payouts as prices rise. They aren't perfect, but they acknowledge the reality that the dollar you spend at 70 won't buy the same basket of goods at 80. Another overlooked danger with bonds is psychological. Many retirees are so afraid of losing principal that they cling to bonds as their only security blanket. But in doing so, they miss out on the moderate, steady growth that could extend their nest egg for decades. The irony is that in trying to avoid risk, they embrace a different kind of risk, the risk of slowly, invisibly going broke. I'll never forget the day Mr. Alvarez, 81, sat in my office, shaking his head. He had been a cautious saver his entire life, working as a postal clerk and carefully tucking away money into government bonds. He thought he had outsmarted the market. But after 20 years of retirement, his income no longer covered his rising medical costs. He had to sell bonds early, at a loss, and eventually relied on his daughter for support. Through tears, he told me, "I thought I did everything right." His story isn't rare. It's the quiet fate of many seniors who trusted bonds without considering the hidden cost of inflation and the reality of rising expenses. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Safety is not about avoiding volatility. It's about maintaining purchasing power. If your portfolio doesn't grow enough to outpace inflation, it's not safe, it's slowly crumbling. And bonds, especially in today's environment of shifting rates and unpredictable inflation, can be the very thing that undermines your stability. So my advice to every senior watching this: do not fall asleep at the wheel. Don't assume that what worked for your parents or what the bank advisor suggests is automatically right for you. Run the numbers. Ask yourself not just what your investments pay, but what they will actually buy 5, 10, or 15 years from now. Because retirement isn't measured in account balances. It's measured in whether your money can keep pace with your life. And if this surprised you, wait until you hear about the next silent threat. It isn't an investment product or an interest rate. It's something far closer to home: cash itself. Yes, the very dollars sitting in your checking and savings accounts, the ones you believe are safest of all, may be the asset that silently drains your retirement faster than anything else. What I'm about to share next may change the way you think about money you thought was untouchable. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, type the number 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. Now, let's move forward into part 3. Cash. The word itself feels safe, comforting. When everything else in the financial world seems confusing or risky, cash is what many retirees cling to. It's tangible. It sits in your wallet, in your checking account, in a neat balance you can check online. No wild swings, no confusing statements, no hidden riders. Just dollars you can see and touch. And after a lifetime of working, saving, and worrying, many older adults decide the best way to protect themselves is to keep large amounts of cash on hand. But what if I told you that cash, the very asset you think protects you most, may be the most dangerous of all? This isn't about theft or bank collapse. It's about erosion. Silent, invisible erosion that works day and night without you ever seeing it. The enemy is inflation, and unlike market crashes or recessions, inflation doesn't make headlines every day. It doesn't shock you with sudden drops. Instead, it quietly eats away at your purchasing power. $1 this year, 95 cents the next, 85 cents a decade later. By the time you realize what's happening, your savings can no longer buy the retirement you planned for. I once had a client, Mrs. Thornton, a 76-year-old former teacher. She had lived through the financial crisis of 2008 and never wanted to feel that vulnerable again. So she pulled nearly all of her savings into a mix of CDs, money market accounts, and plain old cash in her bank. Every month she looked at her balance and felt reassured. The number never changed. It looked stable. But behind the scenes, the value of that money was slipping. Her groceries, utility bills, and insurance premiums rose each year while her income stayed flat. After 10 years, she still had the same $180,000 she started with, but it no longer covered the same lifestyle. Her safe choice turned out to be the riskiest of all. Here's the part that makes this so deceptive. With stocks, bonds, or real estate, you see volatility. You see prices move up and down. It feels risky, so you pay attention. But with cash, the balance looks the same every day. That stability is an illusion. What matters isn't the number, it's what the number buys. And for retirees living 20 or 30 years in retirement, holding too much cash guarantees a loss of wealth. It's like leaving a block of ice on the counter. At first it looks solid, unmoving. But slowly, silently, it melts until all that's left is a puddle. Some seniors say, at least cash doesn't lose value like stocks. But that's not true. It loses value in a different way. Let's say you hold $100,000 in cash for a decade with inflation at 3% per year. At the end of that decade, your money still shows $100,000 in your account, but its buying power is only about $74,000. You lost $26,000 without a single withdrawal. And if inflation spikes higher, as it has in recent years, that erosion happens even faster. Another client, Mr. Whitman, age 82, kept over $250,000 in savings accounts after retiring. He said, "I don't trust the markets. At least I know my money's safe here." But when we compared his income and expenses, it was clear his costs had doubled since the 1990s while his cash earned less than 1% most of that time. He wasn't just losing to inflation, he was losing opportunities. That cash could have been invested in balanced funds, dividend stocks, or even short-term bonds that kept pace with rising costs. Instead, his nest egg shrank in real value until he had to rely more heavily on Social Security. He believed he was playing it safe, but safety in cash came at the cost of freedom. Now, does this mean you should never hold cash? Of course not. Cash has its place. You need liquidity for emergencies, medical bills, and day-to-day expenses. But beyond a cushion, say, 6 months of living costs, cash becomes a liability, not an asset. It looks harmless, but in retirement, where your timeline stretches decades, idle money is dangerous money. So what should you do? First, calculate how much cash you truly need for emergencies and near-term spending. Keep that in checking or savings where it's accessible. But anything beyond that should be working for you. That could mean a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, income-producing real estate, or even inflation-protected securities. The goal is not to gamble, but to keep your wealth at least one step ahead of rising costs. Second, remember that money is not about the number in your account, it's about the lifestyle it buys. Each year, test your portfolio against your expenses. Ask, is my money growing faster than my bills? If the answer is no, you're slipping behind. Third, fight the illusion of safety. Cash feels stable, but stability that guarantees loss is not safety at all. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The world doesn't stand still in retirement. Prices rise, medical costs surge, and lifestyles shift. Holding too much cash is like standing still on a moving walkway. You may not notice it, but you're being carried backward, and by the time you try to step forward, it may be too late. I once told a client, you don't need to be rich to retire well, but you do need to outpace inflation. That's the simple formula. Because whether you like it or not, inflation never retires. It keeps working day and night, year after year, and your money must work too. If this shocks you, wait until you hear about the next trap. It's not cash, not bonds, not even annuities. It's something more modern, more tempting, and often pitched as the future of wealth for retirees. I'm talking about speculative assets, cryptocurrency, penny stocks, and the get-rich-quick investments that promise the world but often deliver heartbreak. In the next section, I'll show you how chasing these shiny distractions has cost seniors not just money, but dignity and independence. And I'll share how to protect yourself from the lure of too-good-to-be-true opportunities. If you're still with me and finding these insights helpful, type 1 in the comments so I know you're here. Now, let's move on to part 4. Speculation. For some people, that word feels exciting. For others, it feels terrifying. But for many seniors today, it sneaks in disguised as opportunity, wrapped in slick marketing and glowing promises of easy money. I've lost count of how many times I've sat across from retirees who tell me about a neighbor, a relative, or even a financial personality online who swore that the real path to wealth was in the next big thing. Whether it's cryptocurrency, penny stocks, foreign real estate, or exotic funds, the pitch is always the same. Simple, fast, life-changing returns. And for people who spent decades working hard and watching every dollar, the idea of finally hitting it big can be incredibly tempting. But here's the truth. As a retirement planner, I've seen more seniors devastated by speculation than any other financial trap. It often starts small. A little money in a new app, a few thousand in a can't-miss stock tip, or even rolling over part of a retirement account into something described as the future. At first, it looks exciting. The numbers move, sometimes sharply upward, giving a rush of confidence. But the higher the climb, the steeper the fall. And when the fall comes, it doesn't just hurt your portfolio, it can shatter your confidence, your plans, even your ability to trust advisors or family. One client of mine, Mr. Dalton, age 72, was a retired machinist. For decades, he lived carefully, saved diligently, and avoided extravagance. But after hearing about a friend doubling his money in cryptocurrency, he decided to take a chance. He put $50,000, nearly a quarter of his savings, into a mix of coins he didn't fully understand. At first, he was thrilled. His balance shot up to $80,000 in just a few months. But then the market turned. Within a year, his account had fallen to less than $15,000. He didn't just lose money. He lost sleep, peace of mind, and trust in his own judgment. He told me, "I thought I was securing a better life for my wife. Instead, I gambled away our security." His story is heartbreaking, but not unusual. Speculative investments prey on two powerful emotions: fear and greed. The fear of missing out on the next big wave, and the greed of thinking you can outsmart the system and cash in quickly. For seniors, both emotions are especially dangerous. You don't have decades to recover from big losses. Every dollar lost now is a dollar your retirement may never see again. And what's worse, scams often masquerade as legitimate opportunities. Smooth-talking salespeople know exactly how to press the right buttons, promising safety, exclusivity, and urgency. I once met a couple in their late 70s who had invested in overseas real estate through an online ad. The promise was guaranteed rental income, steady appreciation, and a slice of paradise they could pass down to their grandchildren. They wired nearly $100,000, only to discover months later that the properties didn't exist. The company vanished, their money gone. When they came to me, they weren't just financially wounded, they were emotionally crushed. They kept repeating, "How could we have been so foolish?" But the truth is, they weren't foolish. They were hopeful. And that hope was exploited. Here's what I need you to understand. Speculation isn't always dressed in flashy clothing. Sometimes it hides in products that sound respectable. Leveraged funds, complex derivatives, even certain hedge fund strategies sold to everyday investors can carry risks so high they have no place in a retiree's portfolio. If you can't explain in one or two sentences how an investment makes money and where the risks lie, you shouldn't put your retirement at its mercy. Does this mean you should never take risks in retirement? Not at all. Risk and reward are part of every financial plan. But risk must be measured, purposeful, and aligned with your stage of life. Putting a small, controlled amount into growth assets like quality dividend-paying stocks is very different from chasing speculative bets where you can lose everything overnight. The goal in retirement isn't to get rich quick, it's to stay comfortably, securely, and independently rich enough to live the life you've earned. So what can you do to protect yourself? First, slow down. If an investment feels urgent, walk away. Real opportunities don't expire overnight. Second, seek independent advice. Don't rely solely on the person selling the product. Find a fiduciary, someone legally bound to put your interests first. Third, trust your instincts. If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And fourth, remind yourself of your purpose. The goal of your money at this stage isn't to double it in months, it's to stretch it across decades while giving you peace of mind. Another point many seniors overlook: speculative losses don't just drain your portfolio, they can force you into decisions you never wanted to make. Selling your home, moving in with children, or cutting back on healthcare. The ripple effects are enormous. A single bad gamble can erase years of careful planning. I often tell my clients, in retirement, boring is beautiful. Stability, consistency, and steady growth may not make headlines, but they make freedom possible. You've worked too hard, come too far, to put everything at risk for a promise in a glossy brochure or a tip from a neighbor. And if you think speculation is the only modern danger, wait until you hear about the next trap. It's not about flashy investments, it's about debt. Yes, even in retirement, debt can creep back into your life and quietly strangle your independence. Credit cards, medical bills, even harmless financing plans for cars or home repairs can snowball into a mountain of stress. In the next section, I'll show you how debt destroys retirement silently and what you can do to break free before it's too late. If you're still here and finding this helpful, type 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. Let's continue with part 5. Debt. For many people, the word brings back memories of their working years: mortgages, car loans, credit cards, maybe even student loans for children. By the time retirement rolls around, most seniors believe debt is behind them. After all, retirement is supposed to be a time of freedom, not financial chains. But here's the truth: debt has a way of creeping back into retirement lives, often disguised as convenience or necessity. And for seniors, even small amounts of debt can grow into crushing burdens that quietly erode independence, dignity, and peace of mind. It usually starts small. A credit card balance that you plan to pay off next month. A medical bill that insurance didn't fully cover. A new car financed because the payments are affordable. But as income becomes fixed in retirement, every dollar borrowed becomes harder to repay. Interest rates, late fees, and compounding charges snowball until what was once manageable becomes overwhelming. And unlike in your 40s or 50s, you don't have decades of career income ahead to dig out. Every payment now comes directly out of your limited retirement resources. I once worked with a client named Mrs. Klein, a 79-year-old widow. She prided herself on living modestly. But when her furnace failed during a harsh winter, she signed up for a no-interest for 12 months financing plan. It seemed harmless, even smart. But life got busy, and she missed the fine print. If the balance wasn't fully paid off within that year, the deferred interest would be added back retroactively, at nearly 20%. By the time she realized it, her $4,000 furnace had ballooned into a $6,500 bill. On a fixed income, those payments became a monthly anchor that pulled her budget underwater. She didn't lose her home, but she lost her confidence. She told me, "I thought I was being responsible. Instead, I feel trapped." Credit card debt is especially dangerous for retirees. Many seniors use cards as a bridge when unexpected expenses pop up. A roof repair, dental work, or travel to see a grandchild. The minimum payments look small, but with interest rates often 18% to 25%, balances can double in just a few years. I've seen retirees paying hundreds each month just to service interest, never touching the principal. And because pride or fear keeps many from asking for help, they carry this burden silently until it explodes into crisis. Medical debt is another growing trap. Even with Medicare, copays, deductibles, and uncovered treatments can add up quickly. Seniors often delay or skip payments to prioritize essentials like food and housing. But hospitals and collections agencies don't forget. I once had a client whose modest savings was slowly drained by a collection company garnishing a portion of her Social Security. She never imagined that an illness could follow her financially even into her later years. Yet for many, this is the reality. Health problems don't just weaken the body, they weaken financial stability too. And let's not overlook mortgages. While some retirees celebrate paying off their homes, many enter retirement still carrying significant balances. Rising property taxes and insurance costs add to the load, and refinancing or reverse mortgages often come with fees that eat away at equity. A house can be both a blessing and a burden. I've met retirees who felt wealthy because their home was valued at $500,000, but they couldn't keep up with the monthly payments. They were house rich, cash poor, forced to choose between selling the home they loved or drowning in debt. Here's the hidden danger of debt in retirement. It doesn't just strain finances, it strains health. Studies show that seniors carrying debt report higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. Worrying about bills keeps people up at night, raises blood pressure, and robs them of joy. Instead of spending retirement traveling, volunteering, or enjoying grandchildren, too many spend it juggling payments and avoiding phone calls from creditors. So what can you do? First, take an honest inventory. Write down every debt, balances, interest rates, and monthly payments. Seeing the full picture can be uncomfortable, but it's the first step to control. Second, prioritize high-interest debt first. Paying off a credit card with 20% interest is a guaranteed return far higher than any investment. Third, avoid new debt whenever possible. That zero-down, low-payment furniture or car loan is not your friend. If you can't buy it with cash, consider waiting. Fourth, if you feel overwhelmed, seek help early. Non-profit credit counselors and fiduciary planners can often negotiate lower rates or consolidate payments. Silence is the enemy. Debt grows fastest when ignored. One of my clients, Mr. Sanders, age 83, faced nearly $40,000 in combined credit card and medical debt after his wife's illness. He was terrified of losing his home. We worked together to create a plan, consolidating balances into a lower interest loan, cutting unnecessary expenses, and even generating modest rental income by downsizing. Within 3 years, he was debt-free. He told me, "I feel like I can breathe again." That's the power of taking action before debt takes over. Debt in retirement is like rust on steel. It starts small, barely noticeable. But if left untreated, it spreads until the structure itself weakens. And by the time you see the damage, it may be too late. Don't let pride, fear, or procrastination rob you of your freedom. Address it, manage it, and remove it where possible. Because retirement should be about choices, not obligations. And if you think debt is the only hidden weight seniors carry, wait until you hear about the next danger. It's not about owing money, it's about trusting the wrong people with it. Yes, elder financial scams and exploitation are on the rise, and even the most careful retirees can fall victim. In the next section, I'll reveal the heartbreaking stories of how scams steal billions from older adults every year, and the steps you can take to protect yourself and your family. If you're still watching and finding this helpful, type 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. Now, let's move on to part 6. Scams. Just the word can make your stomach turn. You've worked your entire life, saved carefully, made sacrifices, and finally reached retirement with a nest egg. But for millions of seniors, that hard-earned security is quietly targeted by people who see them not as individuals, but as opportunities. The sad truth is this: scams and financial exploitation have become one of the biggest threats to retirement wealth. And unlike market crashes or medical bills, scams strike suddenly, leaving devastation that is financial, emotional, and often permanent. I've sat with too many clients whose voices shook as they told me how they were tricked. It doesn't just cost money, it costs dignity. Seniors are often embarrassed, ashamed, even afraid to admit they were fooled. But let me tell you, scammers are professionals. They study psychology, they use technology, and they know exactly how to push the right buttons. Falling victim to a scam doesn't mean you're foolish. It means someone out there was ruthless enough to exploit your trust. Let me share one story. Mrs. Howard, age 81, a retired nurse, received a phone call one evening. The voice on the other end said he was from the IRS and that she owed back taxes. If she didn't pay immediately, he warned, the sheriff would come to arrest her within hours. Panicked, she drove to a store, bought prepaid gift cards as instructed, and read the numbers over the phone. In less than an hour, she had lost $7,000. She told me later, "I knew it sounded strange, but I was scared. I didn't want to go to jail." Fear, urgency, and authority, 3 classic tools scammers use again and again. Then there's the so-called grandparent scam. A client of mine, Mr. Ellis, age 79, was at home one evening when the phone rang. A young voice on the other end cried, "Grandpa, it's me. I'm in trouble. Please don't tell Mom and Dad. I need money for bail." The caller claimed to be his grandson, stuck in a police station after a supposed car accident. Shaken and desperate to help, Mr. Ellis wired $5,000 that night. Only the next day did he realize his grandson had been safe in his dorm the whole time. The money was gone, but the real damage was emotional. He felt humiliated, betrayed, and hesitant to trust his own judgment. And that's the cruel genius of these scams. They don't just take money, they steal confidence. Not all exploitation comes from strangers. Sometimes it comes from people close to you. I once worked with a client, Mrs. Ramos, whose nephew offered to help manage her finances. She trusted him, he was family. Over 2 years, he slowly drained nearly $40,000 from her accounts, disguising it as routine bill payments and investments. By the time she noticed, it was too late. Confronting him tore her family apart. Seniors are often vulnerable not just because of age, but because of trust. Scammers know this, and sadly, sometimes those who exploit are the very people you expect to protect you. Technology has only made the problem worse. Fake emails that look exactly like your bank, fraudulent investment newsletters promising double-digit returns, online dating scams that prey on loneliness. All of these target seniors more than any other group.
Why?
Because scammers know retirees often have accumulated savings, steady income, and sometimes limited familiarity with rapidly changing technology. They aren't just looking for victims, they're looking for you. Here's what I want you to remember. Scams thrive on 3 things: urgency, secrecy, and isolation. If someone pressures you to act immediately, that's a red flag. If they tell you to keep it secret from your family or financial advisor, that's a warning. And if you find yourself dealing with money decisions alone, without a trusted second opinion, you're at risk. So how do you protect yourself? First, slow down. Real financial institutions will never demand immediate payment by gift cards, wire transfers, or cryptocurrency. Second, verify. If you get a call from the IRS, a bank, or even a relative in distress, hang up and call back using a verified number. Third, involve someone you trust. A child, a sibling, a fiduciary advisor. Scammers hate when more than one person is in the loop because it breaks the spell of secrecy. Fourth, guard your personal information. Shred documents, use strong passwords, and never click suspicious links. Small habits can prevent big losses. I often advise clients to create what I call a financial buddy system. Choose a trusted person, a family member, a close friend, or even a professional, who agrees to be your second set of eyes on major financial decisions. Before wiring money, changing accounts, or making investments, run it by them. That extra step alone has saved many of my clients from scams. But let's be honest, even with caution, scams happen. And when they do, it's critical to act fast. Report it to your bank, credit card company, and the Federal Trade Commission. Call your local police. The sooner you act, the better your chance of limiting the damage. Don't let shame stop you. Scammers rely on silence. Speaking up may not recover every dollar, but it can stop the cycle and protect others. I'll never forget what Mrs. Howard told me after her scam. The money hurt, but what hurt worse was thinking I was stupid. I told her what I'll tell you. You are not stupid. You are human. Scammers are predators, and their cruelty is calculated. The best response is not silence, but awareness, vigilance, and sharing your story so others can learn. And if scams weren't frightening enough, the next financial trap is one many retirees never even consider. It doesn't come from outsiders, family members, or even bad investments. It comes from something most seniors see as essential: healthcare costs. Rising premiums, long-term care, and uncovered medical expenses are quietly draining retirements faster than almost anything else. In the next section, I'll explain why healthcare has become the silent wealth killer, and what you can do today to protect yourself and your family from the financial shock no one talks about until it's too late. If you're still with me and finding this helpful, type 1 in the comments so I know you're here. Now, let's move on to Part 7. Healthcare. For most retirees, it feels less like a choice and more like a certainty. Everyone knows medical expenses rise with age, but what many don't realize is just how devastating those costs can be to even the best-laid retirement plans. As a retirement planner, I can tell you this. It's not stock market crashes or recessions that drain the most wealth from seniors. It's the slow, relentless tide of healthcare expenses. The silent wealth killer is not always a scammer or a bad investment. Sometimes, it's the very system you rely on to keep you alive. Let's talk numbers. Studies show that the average couple retiring at 65 today will need over $300,000 just to cover medical expenses throughout retirement. That doesn't include long-term care. That doesn't include unexpected emergencies. And it doesn't include inflation, which pushes the cost of care higher every year. For seniors living on fixed incomes, these numbers are terrifying. But the real danger isn't just the cost, it's the unpredictability. You don't know when illness will strike, how much it will cost, or how long it will last. That uncertainty makes planning incredibly difficult, and for many, it means draining savings much faster than expected. I once worked with a couple, the Harrisons, both in their early 70s. They had saved diligently, nearly $500,000 in retirement accounts, and they believed they were secure. But when Mr. Harrison was diagnosed with Parkinson's, their expenses changed overnight. Between specialist visits, new medications, and in-home care, their annual healthcare costs more than doubled. Within 5 years, their savings was down by nearly 40%. They weren't extravagant. They weren't reckless. They were simply caught in the crossfire of rising medical bills and declining health. And here's the part that most seniors underestimate. Medicare is not free. Yes, it covers many essentials, but premiums, deductibles, copays, and uncovered services add up quickly. Dental care, vision, hearing aids, none of these are fully covered, yet they are vital for quality of life. Many seniors are blindsided when they realize how much is coming out of pocket. And for those who need long-term care, the shock is even greater. Long-term care is perhaps the biggest financial blind spot in retirement. Assisted living, nursing homes, or in-home care can cost anywhere from $50,000 to over $100,000 per year. And Medicare does not cover these costs long-term. Too many families only discover this when a parent or spouse can no longer live independently. I've seen nest eggs that took decades to build vanish in less than 3 years of long-term care expenses. And the emotional toll of deciding between financial survival and proper care for a loved one is unbearable. One of my clients, Mrs. Benson, age 84, lived alone after her husband passed. She was fiercely independent, but a fall left her unable to walk without assistance. Her children arranged for home health aides, which quickly grew to $6,000 a month. She had savings, but at that rate, it was disappearing rapidly. Within 2 years, she had spent nearly everything, forcing her to apply for Medicaid to cover nursing home care. She told me through tears, "I worked my whole life so I wouldn't be a burden. And now I feel like I am." Her story is tragically common. So what can you do? First, acknowledge the reality. Ignoring healthcare costs doesn't make them go away. Second, consider insurance options while you're still healthy. Long-term care insurance, hybrid life insurance with care riders, or even certain annuity products can help cover costs if structured properly. They aren't cheap, but compared to the alternative, spending your entire savings, they can provide protection. Third, build healthcare into your retirement budget. Don't just plan for vacations, housing, and daily expenses. Set aside a specific portion for medical costs, and adjust it every few years. Fourth, talk openly with family. Too many seniors hide the burden until it's too late. Sharing your concerns allows children or loved ones to plan alongside you, rather than being blindsided later. Another often overlooked strategy is staying proactive with your health. Exercise, nutrition, preventative care, these may not sound like financial advice, but they are. Every year you can delay or minimize serious illness is money saved, independence preserved, and dignity maintained. Your health is directly tied to your wealth, and small choices now can prevent massive expenses later. Here's the truth that's hard to swallow. Retirement isn't just about money management, it's about health management. You can have the best investment portfolio, the most careful plan, and the strongest savings discipline, but one medical crisis can undo it all if you're not prepared. That's why I tell every client, retirement planning is not finished until healthcare planning is included. So where does this leave us? We've walked through 7 traps that can quietly destroy retirement savings: costly annuities, bonds that lose to inflation, cash that erodes, speculative bets, crushing debt, ruthless scams, and runaway healthcare costs. Each of these alone is dangerous. Combined, they form the perfect storm. But knowledge is power. By understanding these risks, you are already ahead of millions of seniors who are walking blindly into them. And here's the good news: retirement can still be secure, fulfilling, and free. With awareness, planning, and a willingness to adapt, you can sidestep these traps and build a future defined not by fear, but by confidence. Your money should give you options, not take them away. Your health should give you strength, not drain your savings. And your retirement should reflect the decades of hard work that got you here. So I ask you now, which of these 7 lessons hit home for you? Which one will you act on today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Type 1 if you found this valuable, and let's continue learning together. Because retirement is not the end of the road, it's the beginning of a new chapter. And with the right knowledge, it can be the chapter where you live not just longer but better.